Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you, clients, potential clients, and people that we haven't met yet, to a collaboration with a good friend of mine, partner, friend, business colleague, Jeff Bingham. My name is Billy Hopkins, and this is the first episode of the Four Seasons podcast. So, Jeff, we've been talking about this for a little while. Why don't we take a few minutes? For those that don't know you, even though I think most of the people in this room will, I wanna let you start out by, really kind of introducing you and your team, and then I'm going to jump in and share a little bit of my story here. So again, this is a video podcast that is a collaboration with someone that I've long admired and excited to be doing. And this is our first episode, so bear with us, everyone, and hope you enjoy it. But Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, this is you absolutely bear with us on this as we learn how to navigate this new landscape that we're trying. And you know I've talked about this a long time, and I've thought about doing something like this for a long time, and just didn't exactly know how to go about getting it off the ground. And you and I, with you bringing it to me a couple of months ago, brought it to my attention, and I couldn't be more excited about doing this. And hopefully that'll not only will that show through the excitement that we have, but that we'll also be able to provide a lot of really meaningful and good information to, as you said, to my clients and prospective clients, just folks that are out there that kind of stumble onto our podcast and begin to learn a bit about the B&H culture and the Silver Oak culture. And I think, as you stated very well, is that you and I have known each other now, gosh, for 8.5 years, I suppose it is now. It's hard to believe, but and I think we have from day one we were very closely aligned, and I think over our journey, which we'll get into as we go through this, that we've just found out more and more how closely aligned and our friendship and our business relationship has grown and will continue to grow out of this. So I thank you very, very much. I really can't thank you enough for making this possible. So with that being said, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and the firm. B&H Wealth Strategies was founded in 1966 by my father, one of the founders, Bob Bingham, and his partner Norman Hensley. And as we often say, we were founded on April 1st, actually 1966. So we're just about to hit our 58th birthday. So, but by being April 1st, we're either the longest running April Fool's joke in history, or we are, as we like to say, we're the oldest independent financial planning firm in the Upper East Tennessee area. And I think to really do it justice is that my dad and Norman actually go back even further than 66. There still is an insurance agency in Kingsport called Bennett and Edwards, but back in the late 50s and early 60s, it was the biggest, at least the story goes. And I think if this is not true, they were certainly a very large and prominent insurance agency, but they were the biggest independent general insurance agency uh, east of the Mississippi River. And the Edwards family was a very integral part in the building and growth of Kingsport outside of Tennessee Eastman Company. The Edwards were kind of that family. And my dad was the head of the life department at the time, and Norman was a member of the life department, and a fellow by the name of Bill Cochran and Jim Marquis. They were the four people in that insurance department back in those days. And the reason I mention their names is that my dad and Norman in 1966, when the opportunity came up to buy the insurance part out of it, they did that. But the other two members, Jim Marquis became an Episcopalian minister shortly thereafterwards, and went on to have a tremendous career in the pulpit doing that. And then Bill Cochran, some people out there might actually, if they're in the financial services industry, might actually recognize his name. He went on to be an agent with Northwestern Mutual for a long, long time, but he also became the biggest and most successful general agent, headquartered out of Nashville, rather, that the company had ever known up to a certain point in time. So a very accomplished group of people that were together in that department in 1966. And I think that's really cool. Like, I started thinking about this when I was going through the history and started kind of identifying those things that, that not only my family history and the business history, you start going through these during this season of your life, and you're like, wow, pretty cool family, with some pretty cool friends and very prominent business and ministerial members of the community that are out there. So, but when you found a business like my dad did in 1966, he and Norman, what it really takes to start a business is first an audacious dream and vision that you've got to have, and it takes a great amount of courage to do that, and it takes, well, I would say, a healthy dose of naive optimism, and it takes a total commitment from the family, meaning that my mother primarily, but also my dad's parents, that were still both alive at the time, my mom's mother, my grandmother, because again, when you're starting out a business, coming out of getting running an insurance department versus starting your own business, a lot different. It's a lot different thing. And this is 1966. And I had a brother. I have three brothers, or had three brothers. One of my brothers recently passed away. My oldest brother was 11. My brother Bobby was 9, and I was 6 years old. I may have gotten those ages slightly wrong. But we were also moved into a new neighborhood. All this happened at one point in time, and that's just a lot to have happen. I mean, starting a business is a well, it's an exciting thing, and people that don't own businesses think, man, you got it made when you start your own business. They have no idea the stress and the pressure and the long nights, the sleepless nights, the weekends, the commitment, and what my dad had to do that, to take away time from raising a young family at the same time. And Mr. Hensley, Norman, his family, he had three children and a wife as well. So we were both kind of in the same boat, or they were both in the same boat when they did that. And so that's an awesome dream that started 58 years ago, to take that leap right there. And so, we've navigated from 1966 and to go through to kind of what we've become today. But during the course of that, I mean, you think about the economic cycles that you think about first and foremost, which are, 1966. So the first thing you're coming out of, you're going into the civil rights, you're going into Vietnam, you're going into, Woodstock, love and peace. You're going through the oil embargoes, the end of a war, the end of a a president leaving with impeachment, high inflation, gas prices. Any of this sound familiar to what we're talking about today as well, when you kind of fast forward through these things? And so, and so we had a kind of a very much of a bit of a collapse of the American ideals that we had come out of World War II into the late 50s and 60s, and into the late 60s and the 70s, when America was kind of took that downward turn. And then you kind of fast forward into that, and you see, 1980, and Ronald Reagan comes onto the scene, and it's not his was the revitalization of America, the shining light on the hill that I wrote a little bit about in this last Views. And so the revival of the American dream kind of began to come true again, through that. And so this is us going through that. Then you go through the crash of '87. You go through the recession, the technological boom of the '90s. Then you go through 9/11, the tech. We went through the tech boom. Then we go through the tech bust with all the dot-com things. We go through the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. We go through the pandemic, and we go to where we sit here today, with, well, we can get into some of those things, but certainly, a lot of that, what looks in some ways very similar, if you think about high inflation, interest rates, et cetera, that I talked about in the '70s. Look at where we are in 2024, with the presidential election getting ready to take place, with politics being what it is. You see oil prices and the shortages and the things that we talk about there, the uncertainty of the economy. We had an impeachment. Now we've got a presidential election that looks like, well, we all kind of know what that looks like and what it looks like. See, all those things that we've managed economically through, managed clients' dreams and expectations, and gotten them navigated through them with that successfully through that. And just looking back on that is just really such a really cool thing to think about, and really to not to be just to be proud of myself, but to be proud of this firm, and to be proud of my dad and his partner that built the foundation that has been able to get through those types of things right there. And then also, when you own a business, you go through all your personal tragedies and catastrophes as well. And in 1975, when I was 15 years old, the year before I was starting my senior year in high school, which is a pretty big deal. We were all athletes growing up in my family. And so, I'm in the summer before 1975 going to high school to play football and play basketball and do other things that I was going to do. My dad had a massive heart attack in 1975, like at a time when I was actually at my girlfriend's house at the time. I was supposed to be in at basketball camp, and this is before cell phones, so nobody could find me for a bit because I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And one of my brothers found me, and that's where I was. And so my dad, I mean, he had a massive heart attack, and he was in ICU for over a month, and it took him months and months and years to recover from that. And this is only 9 years after a new business had been started. And I think again that speaks to the fabric and the foundation and the culture that our firm had already built because of Norman and the staff that was in place at that point in time, keeping it around, the family coming together to keep my dad and what my mom had to do to take care of my dad. Still, me going to high school. I got a brother in college, one that's going to law school, one that's starting and playing football and trying to figure out where he wants to play football at the time. So it's a lot of stuff right there. You fast forward, we survived through that. 1982 comes along, and my dad has a battle with alcoholism that I've talked about, my own struggles with alcohol that I've had here recently. It's amazing the sins of the father, I suppose. They don't get too far away. You'd think we would learn, but maybe we not. And Jake's sitting over here, so I'm hoping that he learns and doesn't have to repeat. But my dad struggled, and we went to. So I'm a kid in college. I've been bouncing around in college. I would call myself a party guy, if you will, in college at the time. And then I get word that my dad's off to a treatment center in Peachford in Atlanta, Georgia, to go through. And this is a family. It's a family struggle. So we all go down there. I'm 22 years old, and I am not equipped to be at some place like this, although I probably needed that then for what I was going on. So my dad survives that, and that was the last 28 years, till 28 years after he died from going down there. He never had another drink, and he helped countless people in our community with their struggles with drug and alcohol addiction. And my dad was the finest man that I've ever known, and I say that without any equivocation whatsoever. He was just as good as it gets as a human being. He always told us over the years, and he certainly did this. Your job, leaving from one generation to the next, is to make sure you leave the world in a better place than where you found it. And I've got a long way to go, but that is really what my mission is, and that's what you and I have talked about. And that's why I'm sitting here in this podcast, and I'm still trying to do the things at 64 years old that I have a job to do, and it is exactly that right there what my dad told me I needed to do. And I didn't do that as well as I should have for a long period of time. And I'm determined to make his his edict for me, right? His what he charged me to do, and told me my responsibility. I'm determined to make that responsibility a reality for my children, for my organization, for the firm here, and for everybody that I can come in contact with and influence in any positive shape, form, or fact. And so, so that's a little bit of the history going through right there. I mean, give you a couple of other things. We talk about tragedy. I told you I could talk about the history of the firm for a long time. So this is me not in from 82. I mean, I'm nowhere near coming to work here. I'm still 7 years away from making the decision to come to work here. And so, I kind of drift through college, and I was in the restaurant and management business, bartending we talked about. So I worked at a country club here, and I was I would say I was successful from a social interaction perspective. I knew how to talk to people, working in country clubs, working as a bartender, doing those kind of things. You learn how to communicate, right? You learn how to communicate. You learn what people want to have, right? You learn how to serve them. And if you're doing your job right, this is a little bit of a preview of the Four Seasons. When you learn how to serve and do those kind of things right there, what you really learn when you're in a country club, especially, is that it's not about service, it's about hospitality. And the Four Seasons motto is basically how you turn, superior service into hospitality. And I think that's what I began to learn working in the in the hospitality business, if you will, in the restaurant and country club business. And I went to Dallas shortly after kind of navigating through my college career, got into the private, or excuse me, into the public arena down there at a place called On the Border. Absolutely hated it. I was absolutely terrible at it. It was a great party atmosphere, but I was much better in a small, area, not with hundreds and hundreds of people every night. Seating them and feeding them was the motto there. I was used to being in a world where you catered to your customer, right, to your client. You knew what they wanted. You brought them the drinks, the food that they wanted, and you got to know about their kids and things. And the area that I got into down there, it wasn't anything like that. You didn't get to know anybody. You got them in, you got them out as fast as you could. It was about speed and volume. And though I didn't know it at the time, it's where I began to learn it's not what I want to be. It's not where I want to be. I'm not that kind of person. I'm an intimate relationship, one-on-one kind of relationship guy. So I suppose I learned that down there, but I came home with some hard knocks and some lumps when I came home in 1988, 89, when I came home from down there. And so I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do at the time. And I wondered kind of back to what I knew, into waiting on tables, trying to get a manager job somewhere. And I wasn't able to land that, but I did land a job at Scobie's, which is a restaurant here, to try to, well, I wanted to be a manager. They didn't have a job. So I was actually an expediter, which is the person that grabs the food off the trays and slings it around and hollers at the wait staff to get it out. I mean, that's kind of where I started. But I met my first wife there, Jake's mother, and I met Jennifer there, and she was in graduate school at the time. And she and I got, started going out some. And she she said, "Well, I'm in graduate school. What's your plan? I mean, if I'm gonna be serious about you, what's your plan?" And I was like, "Well, I don't seem to have a very good one at the moment." So that kind of drove me. I went and talked to my dad, and I asked my dad, I said, I'd been around this business my entire life to a degree, halfway paid attention to it and knew kind of what was going on, but not really. So I went to him and just said, "What do you think about me coming and going to work for you?" And he said, "Well," he said, "Son, that's fine." He said, "But you're going to have to learn the business. I don't have enough money to pay you. So, and until you can learn how to do what we do, then, you're going to work and learn the business." And I said, "Well, all right, sounds like okay to me." So for that period of time, starting in 1988, late 88, early 89, I worked at night in the restaurant business. And I came and spent, came here first thing in the morning and spent all my time here learning and trying to, learn how to do my thing here, and just kind of training, I guess, and watching and learning, going into meetings, taking notes and paying attention. And, and then, that's what I did for, probably 6 months. And then shortly thereafter, my dad had gone about a heart attack, he had another heart episode, actually. This was in 1989. And so he was out for a while, and I had no idea what I was doing yet. And I came in and I told Norman, I said, "Well, um, what do I need to do? What can I do to help?" So I got to train under him, is basically that.
Yeah.
So you kind of go forward from that. And so somewhere in late 1989, early 1990, I had enough knowledge and was beginning to kind of be able to contribute to at least helping them create business and process business, let's say here, to where I was able to quit the restaurant business and came on here full time in 90 and 91. And kind of from there, we began to evolve to a degree at that point in time out of, again, we came from a life insurance business, but we came and began to evolve because it was what I was very much interested in, I suppose, and kind of pushed it. We became more and more an investment business. We also
Yeah.
in the 80s, during the very high tax rate years, we did a lot of limited partnership kind of things, back then. So they were doing that kind of tax planning work along those, which was an investment to a degree, but it was more about the tax benefits than it was the economic benefits of a lot of those investments, as it turns out. If you look back on those things. And so I learned in a pretty difficult to understand world, but it helped me begin to think and how these things work. I think it trained my brain a little bit. Not that I'm the smartest guy in the world, but I can learn some things going through that. So, but I began to push, let's go more towards investments, in the mutual fund industry was certainly growing and going much bigger at the time, coming out of the late 80s into the 90s. And at the same time we began to do that, Tennessee Eastman Company, or Eastman Chemical Company, was pushing. They had spun off from Eastman Kodak in 1993, I think it was. And then in 1995, they had a humongous, this is when a lot of people were hired, and they had this point system with their pension system. And they needed to, as it turns out, they didn't really say this, but they needed they needed to get lean and mean in the 90s and answer to shareholders. So you had a lot of people that had started there, in their early 20s, when they started working there. And so they'd been there they had a point system. As soon as they got to 85 points, they had their full retirement benefits. So they could walk with their lump sum pension plan. So people were very much encouraged to do that. They were retiring at very, very young ages, as it turns out, for retirement, and they didn't know any better. And most of the people that were advisors around here just saw money running out the doors. Fortunately for us, so we collected, I mean, there was just a ton of business to go on between 1995 and 2000. It's an amazing amount of money that came out of people retiring out of Eastman from 50 years old to 60 years old. I mean, so many people between 50 and 55, which is a crazy young age to be retiring. I mean, that's a long time for money to have
Yeah.
to last. And I didn't really know as much as I know now about what that means. But I watched my dad and Norman, and we began to ask questions. If you retire this early, what are you going to do for the rest of your life, right? At the time I was asking that question, I was 35 years old, so it was just a question that I heard my dad and them asking, but I would ask that question and they'd always have this quizzical look like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I mean, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? You're going to spend, a third or more of your life, quite likely, if you lived a life expectancy during retirement. It's one thing to have enough money to do it, but what are you going to do to begin to fill your time? Where's your meaning, your purpose, your passion, going to come from? What's going to get you out of bed in the morning? Because when every day becomes the weekend, when it's leisure every day, leisure doesn't mean as much. It's like, how do you know you're having fun if you're always having fun, so to speak, that
Yeah.
kind of thing? And so we began to formulate those questions there, which kind of led us into our four seasons and our lifestyle things that you've seen me evolve into. But that goes back, 20 years before I'd really begun to put that into the actual culture, if you will, and the
Right.
fabric of our business. But that's kind of where that began. And the other thing that I would say that also began out of that is that, fortunately for us, and this got attributed to my dad and Norman, is that we were conservative in our investment planning. And I learned and spent time, I was lucky enough to go to Marty Zweig's office in the late 1990s, very much a risk averse investor, talking about, it's not about how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. And again, so when you think about these folks that I was describing that retired in 1995 to 1997, 80, 98, 99, they're getting ready to go into one of the worst tech, one of the worst market periods you could possibly go through, retiring under 72 T distributions, which were, because they're under 59 and a half, how do you take money out? You got to set up a series of substantially
Yeah.
equal payments. And at the time, interest rates were high enough and their needs were, I mean, these people were drawing 10% from their
Yeah.
investments. I mean, you got a $500,000 portfolio. You're 55 years old, you're set to take out $50,000 a year for the next 5 years until you at least get to 5 years or age 59 and a half, whichever period's greater, right? And you go through a 2000, 2001, 2002, where the market loses 60% of its value roughly,
Right.
right? People, and you got people left and right there. I mean, they're just going to run out of money, and they're 60 years old now. They retired at 55. Now they're 60, and you take out, 50,000 over $250,000 out and a 50% market crush. I mean, do the arithmetic is not exactly right, but you don't have a whole lot of money left if
That's tough.
if you're not measuring it
Yeah.
right.
That's
And
tough.
so we were very much, we weren't absolutely fantastic at it, but we talked about these things. And there was a period of time when the government allowed us to go back in and make a recalculation. And so we were going back to people and making sure. And so we were able to keep our clients financially solvent during that time period,
Mhm.
where you would look at businesses around here, there people were just, I mean, you hear horror stories about people going broke,
Yeah.
trying to find jobs again. I mean, the worst thing that can happen during retirement, right? So I learned in that environment right there, which is, I mean, you can't, and we learned by doing it successfully, not perfectly, but successfully, I would say, right? And so that I was able to cut my teeth in that environment right there, which is, God, it's more valuable than anything that I could ever describe to anybody.
Sure.
And making that happen right there. And then you fast forward through that, and then again you get to the end of the decade, and you have the same thing happen, right? I mean, you basically got
Yeah.
zero returns other than what your bond portfolio looked like. And a lot of people didn't own bond portfolios because people hate bonds and all those kind of things. Well, if
Yeah.
you had a 60-40 portfolio and you got a 5% rate of return or 6% rate of return out of that, and if you measure it out, it would stock, the S&P 500 was zero, but the bond market gave you 7, 8, 9% because not only did you get the yield, but you got the appreciation. So I learned about the use of bonds and interest rates and market corrections and crashes and sequence of returns and all the things that you and I talk about and we talk about in this business. I was able to learn that in the fire, right? From, in the first 10 to 15 years of my career, which is now 35 years long. That's what I was able to learn in this, and from two people that were as good at it as you can ever find in this business that have ever worked in this business, in my opinion. Two different styles from my dad, very much the people person. Norman, very much the analytical person. Also was good with people, but my dad was as good individually with people that I've ever seen. People would tell him anything. He just had that way about him. So, so as I said, so then, and then in keeping through the little bit of, I told you I talked too long on this, but in 2010, my dad passed away in August of 2010. And, that was a very hard thing to do. In the last couple of years of his life, he was so very sick. It was just a hard thing to see, going through that, just watching him deteriorate. But as I've told people that will listen, is that my dad, who was losing his physical health, never lost his intelligence, never lost his optimism and his sense of humor. And he used to tell me on a daily basis when I talked to him, he says, I'm going to get better and I'm going to come down there and help you. And he said that until the day he died. Uh,
Yeah.
and he meant it, and he meant it. But he just had a way about him. And if Jake was over here, he would echo it. They didn't get to see my dad at his best physically, but they got to see him because he was always at his best. So he died in 2010. I lost my I lost my dad, I lost my best friend, and I lost my business partner. And that's a tough thing. And I know your story is very similar to that as well. And then 2 years after that, and again, I think these are things are okay to tell. 2 years after that, in December the 4th of 2012, I was in bed. It was about 4:30 in the morning. It was actually my brother that ended up calling my brother John. I got a phone call at 4:30 in the morning, and John told me that my business, the other founder, Norman Hensley, had committed suicide and killed his wife and committed suicide. And the reason my brother called me is that when the cops showed up, there was a Bingham and Hensley business card somewhere that identified, saw the name Bingham. And my brother
Yeah.
used to work as an attorney. He worked in the DA's office years ago. So he was the one they called, and then he called me. And well, that was a stun. I mean, that's a shocker, right? I mean,
Um,
it's a shock personally to find out that someone that you've known all your life and didn't realize that what was going on in the darkness of their life, that any of that was going on. And then you've also got to deal with it from your business perspective as well. So it's a lot. That was a lot to ingest and digest, I suppose, at the same time, to go through. And I'm just saying all this to say how much we've survived, I guess, through all these
yeah.
things, and gone through that. So we went through that, and dealt with the family and went through those things. And you're also, what you're learning when you're dealing with these things, it's what we do in our business. We deal with families, and we deal with the good, we deal with the bad,
Sure.
we deal with the tragedies, we deal with the catastrophes. We figure out how to pass money from one generation to the next and make the hard things in life, don't make them financially hard, make the other things that they need to deal with on the emotional and the personal level, be able to deal with those kind of things. And that's going kind of through the 2012 thing. And so all this happened before you and I got to know each other, when I when as Scott Parsons introduced us, and kind of in a strange way that occurred
Yeah.
in 2015. Best thing that ever happened in my practice was being introduced to you in Silver Oak Securities. And I mean that, like I said, we had bounced around with different broker dealers. I'd been a part of NFP Securities, which started small, got big, there's a whole different, conversation to have there. But I'd become fairly meaningless, right? Started out as in the firm is the number one, business, right? The number one firm at NFP Securities when we started. As they got bigger and acquired and did things, I became a number, right? And they just it was as impersonal as it could be. And I just don't work well. I'm not good in that environment. Just like I said about the public restaurants,
Yeah.
sector that I got into. I'm just not good at that right there. I need to know who I'm talking to. And so, that I got introduced there, and those were along the lines that the Four Seasons concept kind of came into play. And also, you can also see all of the aging well and living well in retirement, the health and wealth concept, and now the spiritual part of this. This is how all that came to be. You can see the health related issues that have been involved in my life. Like I said, we've been athletes all of our life, and I've always thought that the Binghams are very healthy people. And somebody I was talking to my nephew the other day, and as his dad, he said, "Well, he said what Dad told me many years ago. He said, look, our DNA is terrible." And if you look at it, and he's not wrong. He said we've all had heart issues. My grandfather, died in 1973. I hardly knew him, but he had heart issues his entire life. Had prostate cancer. My dad, heart issues, prostate cancer. My brother John, heart issues, had prostate cancer, died of a heart issue. My brother Bobby, same thing, and I'm in the same boat. So yeah, the DNA is tough, but we have taken such good care of, tried to take such good care of ourselves. And I say that, I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't try to force these things on my clients, but we make it available to, you want to spend retirement having fun, not going to
Yeah.
doctors. And we all do it, going to doctors visits and, not, I don't want you to worry about the dollars and cents. But what we look at is that as life expectancies have increased up until just recently, but basically life expectancies have gone up and up and up over the years. So money has to last longer and longer and longer, right? Our job is to do that. But also what we've seen is that healthy life expectancies haven't increased at all in 30 years. You look at the stats and it's 60 between 60 and 62, all the bad things that I described, from cardiovascular disease, the mental disorders, uh, cancers of all kinds. At 60 and 62, it just starts happening. And so we end up spending so much time dealing with our health issues as opposed to enjoying life and traveling and those things.
Right.
So that's kind of a long-winded history. And I know I went way too long, and apologies for that. But that's the
No,
history of this firm. I mean, it's just it's
yeah.
been a heck of a journey. And and again, and I don't know if you were going to talk about this, but if you look at my journey as I was describing through 2015 and in 2018, I would say my life took a turn that is hard to describe. And probably not too long that I wouldn't have wanted to talk about it. Probably the most significant thing that people will notice is that I'm now blind. So starting in that time period right there, I began to lose my vision. And basically I sit here today with I'm legally blind and can barely see you on the screen across from me. Uh, but it hasn't stopped me from being able to do the things that I can do. And it's put our firm, coming together, and the fact that, and I didn't mention them, that Nancy Stallard, who's been here for over 25 years, my sister-in-law, Sherry Bingham, married to my brother, Bobby, has been with the firm for over 20 plus years, and does everything for me. I mean, they're an amazing, you've seen them at work. I mean, they're amazing and the things that they can do, and they're very intuitive to my needs. And they have to put up with a lot, as I described through the years, and they put up with a lot for me over all the years, but certainly the last 5 or 6 years, and have done it just with a great amount of poise and dignity and just an incredible work ethic to make that happen. And where our clients haven't missed a beat in all this. And then of course, Jake has come on to the firm now and is working with me, and has come in certainly in the last couple of years. I've been off and on through school and whatnot for probably 6 years, but in the last 2.5 years has played a vital role because I couldn't do it without him, because he literally is attached to my hip. Put this
Right.
together. The reason I'm on here with you is because he's here. Everything that you saw us do when you were here a couple of weeks ago, putting
Mhm.
together plans and getting me in a position where I'm in front of a client the client wouldn't know that I can't see when I'm in there. I mean, they really wouldn't, because I'm blessed, knock on wood, for the time being, with a memory. If you put it in my head, I can remember it. I'm blessed with that kind of ability. That's not me. That's God's given me that ability. I'm just smart enough to know He's given me a gift that I can utilize along those lines right there. So, I think, and I say this every day, I think this firm's best years are in front of it. We've been around for 58 years, but I think this is going to be the best year we've ever had. And I think each and every year going forward, it's just going to get better and better, thanks to the collaboration that you and I have now put together, to kind of, we've worked together for a long time, but we've kind of done it a little bit piecemeal. But I think now, if we really do this well in a collaboration, that the future for Silver Oak Securities and B&H Wealth Strategies is whatever the limitation is, the limits that we put on it going forward.
So for those of us who haven't met, I am president of Silver Oak, and did meet Jeff in 2015. One of the best days of my life. So I was born from a family business as well. My father was a school teacher and a basketball coach, and we jokingly called him Bobby Knight, but wonderful man. You could hear his voice just resonate through the gym. I mean, it was just so loud. And but I always remember growing up, he had a paper route. He had all these different things because he was trying to put us through private school. Just struggling as a teacher and these things. So he decided at the age of 45 he was going to take a second career in the insurance business, and ended up having many agents with him. Moved our family when I was in the 5th grade to Jackson, Tennessee, and my mother joined his organization. She was his right arm, his left arm, and did everything for him. She was a church secretary, and I just remember at a very early age going to the Lions Club and different things, and seeing him collaborate with many agents. And it was nothing. I'd go to dinner with them after meetings and different things, and I could always remember there were 30, 40, 50 of them. And just, I guess it resonated with me that this kind of business was to be built through other connections and through other people, just as opposed to working directly with individual clients, because that was kind of what he did as well. But every Friday night he would go to these meetings, and I was young, and I would kind of end up having to go. And so it was just something that resonated with me, and just buried down deep. Went to college and wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. Other than he told me I had to go get a business degree. And that I should never be a teacher. Of course, I walked in and said, "Hey, I want to be a teacher." That's, of course, what you do.
It's what my dad wanted to be, as a teacher and a coach, and what my brother Bobby is, a teacher and a coach still to this day. So it runs it.
Yeah, he
those
just
are
told
also
me,
very
I don't care
similar
what you
things.
do, as long as you don't want to be a teacher. And of course, that was the one thing I said I was going to be. And then that kind of changed. And I went into his office and asked him what he did one day. I was waiting tables, I was doing things, and he just kind of showed me what a mutual fund did, and it just kind of connected with me. I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll come work for you this summer. And if I don't like it, I figured I'd go do something else." And I never left. So, he encouraged me through every step of the way. And I had my mother there, who still works for our firm even today. She's known as Miss Ann.
Yeah.
And they just encouraged me to do whatever we wanted to do. But somehow the idea came about. I was 24 years old. Hey, why don't we start our own firm? My mother was like, "That's the worst idea ever." My dad was like, "Let's do it." And I was like, "Let's do it." She was probably right. Awesome. But we did. We're in Jackson, Tennessee, and people would say, where is Jackson, Tennessee, and who in the world are you, and things like that. But I knew there was a little rule in the regulatory world that said you can only be licensed with one firm. So I was like, well, why can't that be us? So we started there, and now The first year that we started our firm were some of those market collapses that you talked about. I got licensed and I got our approval in 2000, and then that's when the NASDAQ crashed. And then in 2003, that's when the financial service hit. That was when the financial service crashed, and then '08. You kind of climbed through it, and here we are, 24 years later, and we're kind of still doing it, still enjoy the business, still working with people like you, Jeff, and also, one of the reasons I want to do this podcast with you is, I remember one of the first conversations I had with you, just where you talked about your approach there at the firm. It always resonated with me. It always seemed to be a little bit more than the money, a little bit more than just some of the concepts, some of the beliefs that we're going to be talking about on this podcast. Always seemed to be a little bit more than just dealing with the X's and O's of just the financial part. There's so many different things about this business. So it is a wonderful business, but at the same time, I mean, you're dealing with life, you're dealing with the unexpected, you're dealing with so many things. And so, to take us through those 60 years, you wake up one day, your dad has kind of had an unfortunate health issue. His business partner, what were you, 40 years old? Were you 35 years old at the time that, you're now kind of thrust into the primary decision maker in everything?
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Yeah, probably I guess the time that I would have become where I became the kind of the leader, but they were still around. Where I became a leader was in probably the early 2000s. So when I, probably 10 to 12 years, I would say, literally around the time of the tech bubble, 9/11, became I guess the de facto, leader of the company, just because as they were aging out and wanting to begin to slow down as my dad was. And then Norman actually retired kind of in 2005, somewhat, I guess, officially, unofficially, so to speak. And so I would have been 45 in 2005. So I was born in 60. So, in my early 40s, when that occurred. And so, I was new in the business. I mean, I didn't really start in the business until I was almost 30. So in 1989, and I didn't really know anything then. So let's say 1990. So I was 30 years old after spending a bit of the first career, I guess, in restaurant management, let's say. And so, which was great, really background for coming into, as I suggested right there. And then, so I guess I'm 50 when my dad dies, and then 52 when Norman dies, so which is, those are tragedies. I mean, and the suicide was definitely a tragedy, and, you're never wired for those things, but, in a sense though, it's a lot, I'm fortunate, it's fortunate, it's not the right word, that at least I wasn't 30 years old when that happened. I was 50, and I dealt with, and I didn't say anything about this, and I didn't mean to have interrupted you, but in 2005, my youngest, my 18-year-old now daughter, that's a freshman at UT, Juliana, was born. I have 3 children, but she was born in 2005. And when she was born in 2005, and this is when Norman was retiring, and the reason I come back to this is that my first wife, Jennifer, my children's mother, was diagnosed with choriocarcinoma, and which is basically, if you've read Lawrence Armstrong's book, it's the same cancer that he had, but hers was a pregnancy, so it was bloodborne, and she was stage 4, and so we were rushed to Duke at the time. I mean, she was almost dead, and because we got to Duke, she survived that. But we were down there. We lived in Durham, North Carolina, and from the summer of 2005 until October 2005 in Durham, and she was at Duke University Hospital, going under treatment, and survived that. So again, the point of that is not so much to feel sorry for me and the tragedy of that. It's really to say that this is how my firm has been able to navigate coming together, the individuals that have worked here, the staff that's worked here, and the community and the clients. Because I was back and forth probably after August, back and forth working, but like I said, for 4 or 5 months. I mean, I set up I set up a remote office down there and worked. And then Norman came back to work, and my dad worked as well during that time period. So, we could go down there and nurse my children's mother, back to health so they could have a they could have a mother and not just a dad. But it wasn't anywhere close to being equipped to do all of that. So anyway, I didn't mean to, so you can just see how these things happen.
Yeah.
But it's the things that have all of those things are what have made this firm and this connection, as you described right there, how we do it different. That's what makes me, that's what, it's what makes everybody different, but it's what resonated with me is this is the connection that I need to have with people during their lives. Because these
Sure.
things that happen to us in our life, these stresses, these tragedies, these catastrophes, that's what life is. And so we just want to talk about the money part of it. We for sure don't want that to be a problem for them. But we need to deal with him on a level that we can discuss these things with him. Because if we're not doing it with him, who is, right? I mean, who is? And that's what somebody told me that a long time, and I don't recall who it was. And that's how I got into this relationship type of because it is a relationship business.
Yeah.
We say those things. I don't think most shouldn't say it's not fair. I don't think that a lot of people take that as literally as I do, right? Of building that relationship. And we don't, and it's not going to resonate with all the people that walk in our door. And I understand that, but that's the kind of relationship I want to have with my clients. It's the kind of relationship that I want to have with my business partners, like that I have with you. That's the relationship that we've built, and that's why this is going to last and endure for as long as you and I are around, I believe.
So one of the things I found, I come to a lot of offices, and I love that I came in through the kitchen. I think they told me to make some coffee, and I just found that very warm and inviting. You've been in that location what now? How many years?
Since 1987, so it'll be
87.
40. What is that? Yeah. So 47 years.
Yeah,
47 years.
So your the firm's history is a fixture in the community, and your firm's office is right there and is a fixture as well. So, I think,
yes.
Those are all things that stability is important in our career. And I think you guys have definitely shown that. So, the goal of this podcast obviously is we're going to be addressing a lot of topics that you cover, things that are important to your customers there and that we
37
see.
years. By the way, anybody's checking my math, that's 37 years, not
37.
47.
I didn't have my calculator.
Everybody checks me on that. So you correct that very clearly. So it's like, man, he's a math guy. What is that?
Your newsletter is called From Wall Street to Center Street. So we're going to be trying to talk about a lot of topics that are dealing with Wall Street and Center Street that are there in your community. And I think it was wonderful to hear the history of your firm. I mean, some of it that I've heard, not all of it that I had heard to that detail. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Thanks for allowing me to.
Well, and again, we are born of a family business, and a lot of people may or may not know what a quote broker dealer is. So I appreciate getting to share my story. We're the back engine in the office that lets that kind of provides the products and the oversight. And we've got an office in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then one back home where I was from in Jackson, Tennessee. I actually live in Memphis now because that was just where my wife and I decided we wanted to raise our kids. And so, it's just, wonderful to have this opportunity again today. We are here to kind of kick this off, launch this. This is episode uno numero one of our sharing ideas. But, I spent 2 days with you a month ago. Just kind of got to see how you work and how you work with your staff, and and even met a few of your clients while you were there, and just couldn't be more excited about what you're putting together there, the vision that you've had, and I think it's carried and spilled over from what you started when your dad started in the 60s. And is carrying on through today. I will share, one quote that you know, I did pick up from this. I'm going to share my screen again if I can figure out how to do that. There we go. So this is something I think I've seen on a couple of your brochures and things that you have. Um, if you don't change direction, you might end up where you're going. Talk about that for just a minute, Jeff.
Um, yeah, I was trying to remember exactly where I saw that the first time. And I don't recall. It's been a decade, probably 15 years ago. I saw it somewhere, probably at a conference I was at, maybe. But I'm always looking for sayings like that. But this one right here, um, it resonated with me. Now, at the time when I saw it, it resonated with me as as it just related to the retirement planning business. Now, I'll fast forward here in a few minutes and talk about. I think it has much deeper meanings than that, and I should have realized that a long time ago. But that's kind of my journey as well. But you know, it I tied it to, we talk about retirement GPS, and so we're doing retirement planning. And when people look at their financial situation, and what we always talk about, what that means is that bring your stuff in. We want to sit down. We'll talk about what we do. You tell me where you are, where you want to go, how you want to get there. So we've used those three things have been the three things that have been the foundation of every meeting that I've ever had with any client. And my dad started, and we started that. It's on a mission statement out front. I need to do a little revision to it, and I need to put some gray hair on the guy that's in the picture of the quote and kind of expand on it. But those three questions right there, right? I mean, it's pretty simple, but it's really all you need to know. And then you just let people, you just give them the canvas to paint it. But when you look at where they are and where they want to go and how they want to get there, what they're going to show you and what their plan, if they have one at all, it's going to tell you where they are and are they on their right track. In other words, if you're not going in the right direction, wouldn't you want to know that? Because if not, you're going to end up where you're going. So it's right. It's really just it's a check of where are you right now? Are you going in the right direction? Are you a bit lost? Or can you take a better route to get to where you're going? So that's kind of how we started it right there. And the funny thing about this is I've used this quote and I've used it internally in my office. The first time I used it in here, I wrote it up on the board in the conference room downstairs in a staff meeting, as we have all the time. And I wrote it up there and I said, "What do you think about this statement right here?" And Sherry and Nancy, and I think Kathy Reinhardt worked for me at the time, and she was in here. So there was an additional staff member. And they kind of looked at it and saw, but Sherry looked at it and she just said, "I don't know what does it mean?" So what that began to tell me is that not everybody looks at that statement and gets the same thing out of it. Because to me it meant something immediately. If you're going in the wrong direction, you need to change direction because you're going to end up at some place where you have no idea where you are, or the place that you least wanted to go. And if you want to think of it in a spiritual sense, well, if you're going in the wrong direction there, if you're not going towards heaven, you're going towards hell, as an example. And that was where it resonated to me all many years later. But it was just that simple right there. But it has so many, I think, so many elements and so many paths that you can take from that about what direction you're taking. It could be the direction of, as we started off from a financial plan, right? Are the investments that you're taking, are the things that you're doing, is the debt repayment or the debt you're taking on, all those things, are they moving you in the direction you want to be going in? Or is it going in the wrong direction for you, right? So that's obviously first and foremost. But it could also be in a relationship with your spouse, with your children, with you name it, or if you're an athlete, what direction are you taking there? If it's for a younger person, can take it about where they're going, thinking about their career. I mean, in any of those things. And like I said, I think coming fast forward with me, where it began to really resonate more and it came back to having much more impactful meaning is that, I certainly had begun to, not that I wasn't brought up in a Christian home and in church and everything, but I never took it as what I would say, I never took it as seriously as I should, even as a
Yeah.
child and even as a young adult. And then as life began to come at me, as I described in 2018, without going into all the elements of that, I really began to question by faith a lot because if there, again, if there was a God, why would God do these things to me? That was the question I had, which is a ridiculous question, I know now, but I was wrestling with that. and I'd begun to dismiss it in the wrong direction. I'd gone completely in the wrong direction about that right there. So I was certainly going in the wrong direction, and I was certainly heading where I was going, and that was certainly not a good place. And by the grace of God and a very good friend of mine and my new wife, who didn't abandon me at times when she could have. And I was always good with my clients. I mean, I had a work ethic, but I was doing a lot of wrong things. When I clocked out here, my life was a mess. When I clocked in, I could put my life back together, and I mean that so everybody could listen to that that's out there. I don't want to suggest that, and I think you would know that just from talking to me over the years. But I was struggling with a lot of things at that point in time. And like I said, by the grace of God and a friend that put me back and showed me what direction that I was going in, and showed me what that direction, what that destination looked like versus the destination that was available, I was able to change directions. And wow, has it changed my life. And it will be, so those that are out there listening, the 24th of March, which will be Palm Sunday, I will have 365 days of sobriety. And it was Palm Sunday a year ago that I was saved again. So it's a very, as Easter season comes upon us and Palm Sunday and Easter comes, which will be the 31st of March, I just have this, I use the term intersectionality very cautiously in the world that we talk here with the cultures and ideology intersectionality, but the intersectionality of my sobriety, faith, and the way that I view the world through God's lens now is all just coming right here in the Easter season. And it's just, I mean, the resurrection and the restoration and resurrection that I've had has been nothing short of phenomenal, in my opinion. So I take a lot of people, you included, in that right there. So
Well,
that's what that's what that saying means to me. So
we've had our discussions about things, and I think you and I have traveled similar paths. And mine was, I know we're gonna talk about health and we're gonna talk about wealth, but there is a little bit of faith that goes into some of those, into where we're at, and wanted to put my kids in Christian schools. I wanted to go to church with my wife. We kind of found our own thing, but then we had a tragedy in our family, and my wife looked at me one day. She's like, if something happened to you, our pastor wouldn't even know your name. We wouldn't even have any. We were going to a kind of one of those mega churches, and she said, I don't know that they would even know who we are. We're like ghosts. So we decided to, at that point, and it wasn't anything wrong. You were kind of there. We were just sitting in the back. We weren't doing anything. And at the time, I know one time I was looking at whether UT hired their football coach or whatever, because it came out on a Sunday, and I'm more worried about that than anything. And then we started teaching Sunday school, and that changed a lot because you were having to. We really dove into it and started teaching. At first, it was just because our kids were there, and then we took a broader view. And the next thing you know, you're really kind of starting to have the faith of a child. And so it was a wonderful thing. And so we kind of met in this conversation about a year ago around that same time, because I had decided we didn't need to be a ghost. We actually needed to commit, and we've done that. So well, real quick,
and that was Jeff, independently of one another, we discovered that we kind of got to the same place at the same time. Again, kind of like meeting in 2015 as we did, right? Yeah, it's really
that's
cool.
Exactly right. So real quick, we're going to kind of wrap this up as we asked this question, why this podcast? That was kind of one of the questions that we wanted to kind of hit on was, just why this podcast. So today we kind of went through the story of our two firms, where we are today, and things that we've seen, are going to be prevalent. We're going to have topics where we talk about the markets and just our thoughts and stuff, because that is important. Yes. But in your opinion, what do you hope to get out of this for our customers?
Well, I think, probably talked a lot about that all through this. I think I go back to what my dad said to me is that it is my responsibility, it is our responsibility, as individuals on this planet with our kids and our clients and our community that we can touch, is our responsibility to try to impart some wisdom on the world of things that we've learned and leave the world a better place than which we found it. And I think this is a tremendous platform for us to be able to do that. I mean, well, and I mean, I think it's as big a platform as we could possibly have to come out of just what is our offices in our community and so on and so forth. So, um, and I think people can, can learn from just the conversation that you and I have had here today. And certainly a number of the conversations that you and I have had privately that we can begin to have now a bit more publicly. And people that, gosh, what I will tell people that look at me, and this is what I hope. And I'm not doing this because this is what I think God has called me to do. This is not me trying to put myself out in front of any of these things. But if a 63-year-old man who has lived a fairly privileged life, and I mean, obviously I'm a white privileged guy, so, but I don't mean by that, but lived a privileged life. I mean, I grew up in a community. I was known in the community. My family has been known in this community their entire lives. I mean, my grandfather owned a furniture store. I mean, we've just been part of this. My brother is recognized, has got the field house road that leads up to where his athletes train is named after him. It's Bob Bingham Boulevard. I mean, I can go on and on about these things. My brother was probably the most prominent lawyer, definitely the most prominent lawyer in Kingsport, probably in the region, anywhere people will tell you that. And so here was me, the young prodigal out running around doing his thing, kind of came and worked with his dad, and then kind of fell out of grace a bit, and then God, then was blinded, so for whatever, just because it happened to me, but he kind of lost his way, but the firm was still around. But if a person like me can 63 years later can come and find Jesus and can figure out a way to navigate the world blindly, right? But have total clarity. By losing my vision, I gained total clarity, but it hasn't also kept me from being able to do my job, to find purpose, find meaning, and continue to lead clients in their financial journey with a bit of the health and the spiritual journey that really is a big part of that right there. And that's, and I know maybe that sounds grandiose for me talking like that, but I think that story can resonate with people that are our age, but also people that are younger, that they can make these decisions before they have these kind of, catastrophes to a degree that they have to deal with. I mean, you don't have to go to the bottom of the abyss, right? There's light down there, but I'm telling you, man, it's a long, murky swim and it's hard to get out of. And I'd just like to spread that message for people not to do that. But also, I mean, I think I have a pretty good view of how markets work, how to invest money, how to guide people through that, and how to navigate a very interesting culture and political landscape and what that means in the investment world. So that's kind of
Well,
that's my thinking about the podcast.
yeah, well, I'm 53, so I I've, I've come through this financial markets when at interesting times, and now I see my generation helping their parents having to go through some of those things that you've gone through, seeing what that life is like. And so I'd like to have some conversations kind of about that, because as we think about the B&H clients out there, there's multiple generations. Some of you may even have one above you, some of them one below you. How we navigate these issues in a world where, thanks to the grace of God and our economy, we do have what I call champagne problems. We got some really good ones out there. We create a lot of wealth. Economy has, because my first president was Ronald Reagan. Whether you think, coming from the Carter administration or different things, hey, there's stocks, bonds, cash. There's different kind of asset classes out there, but we've been able to buy real estate. Our homes have gone up. So we've got some really good things. We got taxes. We got stuff to navigate, and we can just have conversations around a lot of these. I love the Four Seasons approach. We're going to dive into that next week and really kind of hit on what that's all about. And really, I know you got a newsletter coming out. Why don't you talk for a minute about that? Your Wall Street to Center Street, real quick, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. So I call it my views from Wall Street to Center Street. I've been publishing that for, I don't know, going back into the mid-teens, the 2015, probably a little bit before I came on board with you. I was probably had started doing that. So, I'd called it different things, but it's not a canned, writing. It's got some generic information in it, but I started writing it to try to convey what my opinions were on the things that Wall Street is, what they're seeing on CNBC or other news, or wherever they're getting their financial news. A lot of that's going to be from CNBC, and so maybe Fox Business and that kind of thing. And they would always, my clients would always come in and talk about, they'd see something, in a headline, 5-second or maybe a 5-minute thing, and they say, oh, this is going on out there, and I'd go, well, what do you think that means to you? And they go, well, I don't know, it can't be good, or I need you to tell me that, or something like that. And so so instead of us just writing canned responses that would look just like what they were seeing on the news, I decided to take the information, put the kind of put that the meat of that in there, but on the front and on the back end of that, kind of writing my own personal notes around that and kind of breaking that down. And so if you read my last one, it had a lot of personal notes in it, certainly, and I've built on that over the years. But it is just that simple. It is me taking a lot of information that I can gather out there in the marketplace, because we're inundated with information from everywhere. There is no shortage of information that you and I and everybody out there can get, right? I tend to take it down to more levels where we use our Aptus Capital partners and people like that more than I used to do, because they're philosophically aligned, and they're very much tuned in to Wall Street. And so we use a lot of their data that we look at right there. But then I take it and try to break it down into simple terms and look at it from that perspective. And I'll talk about what's going on in the firm and the personal things, because people like to hear about those things as well. But it certainly has grown into be quite it's something I enjoy doing, or I love writing. That had been taken away from me for a bit before I kind of learned how to do it again. With losing sight and writing's a hard thing, but it's doable. I can tell you that it is manageable to do that. And one interesting thing about the writings, I'll say, in December of 2017, because if you read, and I've talked about Bitcoin quite a bit, and I assume we can talk about this without having compliance issues. But I wrote about Bitcoin in 2017, and I was a complete naysayer about it. I completely said, no way. I had no idea about it, but it just had gone to, it'd been at like 7,000 earlier. It shot up to 21,000 in December. So there's a lot of talk about it. And I compared it to the tulip, the tulip craze of the 1600s, the Dutch tulip craze, and kind of written along those lines on it. And certainly in 2021, we began to implement it in portfolios. So I had a complete, about face, and people would look at me and say, well, I thought you didn't like it or anything. When the facts change and the information changes, that's what you're right about. So I'll write about things like that and go touch on those kind of things as well. So that's really what Views is. It's what's going on in the marketplace, what's relevant to inflation and interest rates, and markets up and down, and the election and all those kind of things. But then I try to put my perspective and my global view, which again now is much more of a a Christ-centered lens, right? In that, but to put my lens on that, because that's how we put together portfolios. That's what I talk to every client about, is coming from my lens, and then we have those discussions and those review meetings about those things.
So I want to wrap up with this. So I'm going to edit this out, Jeff. First of all,
Wait till we do this live. It'll be so much fun to do
Thank you.
this and
This is
have your
wonderful.
graphics.
Thank you from all of us at B&H Wealth and Silver Oak Securities for tuning in today. My legal disclaimer, we really didn't get to our investment side, but we will. These topics are not intended for legal advice, and obviously consult Jeff or your tax attorney or anybody before or making any decisions that we might talk about on this podcast. So Jeff, thank you. I'll see you in a few weeks, and more to come.
Yeah, thanks to everybody out there that's going to listen to this, and hopefully it was meaningful and had some, you got some good information out of it. And as far as I'm concerned, this was a blast, and I can't wait to keep doing it. Thanks to everybody
Thank
out
you.
there, and thanks to you, Billy,
Yeah.
for putting it together.
Yeah, see you in a couple of weeks. So thank you.
All right, peace out.